Jason is a researcher and a professor, therefore Jason is a professor, or Jason is a researcher, whatever. Bam. First part, Jason is a researcher and a professor, premise cluster. Where I have multiple accounts, what was the example I gave? All rationalists are idealists, all idealists deny mind-independent reality. That is my premise cluster, right? So basically the stuff that comes at the top. Okay, should be clear. We're moving through this a little quickly, but there's no need to complicate it more than it needs to be complicated. I think it's relatively clear. All right, number 8. Now we can erase all this good stuff. Number 8. What was I talking about? Number 8, page 8. Now I'm actually going to get into the types of interwoven arguments, and we're going to see link-supported combinations with single-supported. We're going to start to understand how to map it. These are just one of 4 forms. There's many different ways to map. And mapping is a flexible act. There is no one right way to map an argument. People are going to have various ways that they map the argument. This isn't something that would ever... It doesn't really serve... Well, I can't take that. I take that back. It does serve conceptual function, but it's a personal function. Right? For me, if the argument's really, really dense, I don't do this anymore. I did this when I was a lot younger. But when I first started, I definitely did. You're sitting there reading, I remember clear as day, I remember I was reading Hume, and I was like, I don't know what the hell this dude's talking about. It took me forever to understand David Hume. Kant, I got relatively, well, I don't know why I got Kant a little easier than Hume, but Hume, I just couldn't get it. It's because, some of the denials that he, and the skepticism is so freaking rigid. Like, I love Hume now, but I remember reading passages in Hume, and I was like, I just don't get this. I was like, oh yeah, I know how to do that. So I mapped out his argument, at least what I thought his argument was, or what I thought the map of his argument looked like, or was to look like. And I'm dead serious when I say this. In seeing the actual visual representation, right, as far as the structure that I'm about to teach you now, as far as seeing that, it sticks with you. Because now you have all these in my head, and I'm not making this up, and you will too by the end of this, right? You'll be able to have all these visual representations of arguments. You won't have the argument in your head yet. You won't even have the words in your head, but you can have an image in your head, and you're like, I want to create an argument that fits that image. So let me write the image out first. And after I write out the image, then I want to structure an argument that looks like that. I mean, to me, that's beautiful. That's just beautiful. That's real mastery, right? That's real mastery. And there's a bit of art in it, right? There really is quite a bit of art in that. So, this is my feeble attempt at being an artist. You guys see my stick figures, you know I can't draw. Alright, so 4 forms of interwoven arguments, right? 4 forms of... Four forms of interwoven arguments. Now the first form is the following. Diverging. Diverging was the first one? I thought I started with yeah, okay, doesn't matter. First is diverging arguments. Alright. And here's what it is, right? Quote, beginning at the same premise cluster, so they begin at the same premise cluster, but draw out different and quite often complementary conclusions. And the form of a diverging argument looks like this, right? You have S1, some random statement, plus S2, all the way out to Sn, doesn't really matter. And then that arrives at LMNO, the next sort of NP, right? So this is the format. I probably should use a different color. Yeah, I want to use a different color because I want it to stand out. I'll use a different color. Alright. So we have S1 plus S2 plus ... Sn leads me to SO. Leads me to SO and SP. That's the format. So you have this in your head, right? You have this image in your head. You have to learn how to apply concepts and words to this, but once you learn, and it's very easy, once you learn how to apply concepts and words to this, you can just have that image in your head. I want to create an argument that looks like that, right? I have that image in my head. This is relatively basic, right? But what we want to do is, I want to start, it might not be basic for you, so I shouldn't say that. It will be basic in about 5 minutes, right? In 5 minutes or so, after I finish explaining it, you should be like, okay, I get it. Okay, so this is the format that the argument takes, right? This is sort of like, in math they say the formula, I guess. This is sort of like the formula, this is a structure. And then we input any type of sort of statement, and we arrive at divergent conclusions. So let me give you an example. This is not my example, this example comes from the book that I was telling you about, which I think is great. Okay, so the American dollar is a very strong, person with European currency. I think it's position, I typed that wrong. Sorry. Of course I didn't bring the book. The American dollar is in a very strong position with the European currencies. This means that European goods here will be real bargains, right? This means that there'll be real bargains. Why? Because the American dollar is strong, right? As far as currency exchange, you get more for your American dollar in Europe. So what does that mean? This means that European goods here will be a real bargain. It'll be cheaper here. European goods, that is. But it also means that our exports abroad will be at a competitive disadvantage. What does that mean? Since the dollar is strong here, once we export our goods to Europe, since their dollar is not, this is obviously an old argument, but since their dollar is not strong, and it doesn't matter, right? Since their dollar isn't as strong as ours, we'll be at a competitive disadvantage because they'll sell the same exact product for a less price, right? So that's basically the argument, right? So the American dollar is relatively strong with respect to European currencies. This means that European goods will be a bargain, but it also means that we're going to be at a competitive disadvantage. So let's map out this argument, right? So the first thing, number one, is the American dollar is strong in comparison with the European currencies. Okay, so that's number one, right? And that comes from the actual quote above. And I'll make sure I update the notes to make sure I get that quote right. Number two, European goods. Oh, always. By the way, every time you come back to watch the video, just as an aside, refresh your notes, because occasionally I'll go back and I'll fine-tune some things and change it. So, you know, constantly be in the case of updating your notes. European goods here will be a bargain too. So Euro goods in the US, to be technical, will be a bargain. Number three, however, says American goods abroad will be at a competitive disadvantage. Right? So, I mean, representing this argument in diagram, like this divergent argument in a diagram form, is pretty simple. Here's the premise, and we're arriving at two different conclusions, both 2 and 3. Right? One is that the American dollar is strong compared with European currencies. Right? The American dollar has more value than European currency, so I can get more with my American dollar. Right? The disadvantage. All right, so this will be the bargain. The disadvantage, however, is that the American dollar will not be competitive. The same premise implies two different conclusions. So, I mean, just off the top of my head, to make up one just right now for super quick, being the smartest kid in the class will gain you attention. This is right off the top of my head. I swear I didn't prepare this right. So, being the smartest kid in the class